Okay, so we are going to have the next small series of videos is going to be on the concept of learning. We're going to go through. We got about 3 or 4 videos that I'm gonna put together, and they're all going to be talking about this idea of learning. So our dictionary definition that we'll go with for learning is the long-lasting change in behavior due to experience. So, what is learning? Learning is this idea that you watch something, you study something, you observe something, and the end result, if you're paying attention or if you find it important enough, is that that will at some point change the way that you see the world, change the way that you behave because of this experience. Everything that you know how to do stems from some type of experience, whether it be large, whether it be really, really small. Um, and so, um, so this is what we are going to be talking about: the different ways in which a person learns. In this video, we will start with a concept known as classical conditioning. It's started by a gentleman by the name of Ivan Pavlov. That name might ring a bell for you. And then in the next video, we'll talk about operant conditioning. We'll talk about observational learning, and then we'll kind of wrap up with a bunch of different random concepts that fall into the learning concept. So let's start with Ivan Pavlov. Okay, so when talking about classical conditioning, we need to start with the person that started it, Ivan Pavlov. So Pavlov was not actually a psychologist, he was a physiologist. He was a Russian physiologist who actually won a Nobel Prize for his work on the digestive system. So he's a pretty big guy um, just in the field of science, and not even talking about his contributions to the world of psychology. So um, the concept of classical conditioning was something that Pavlov stumbled into in his work, and decided to explore it, as it actually ruined some of the studies that he was working on. So let's go through what happened. So in Ivan Pavlov's research, what he was doing at the time was he was studying salivation of dogs and in food. So what he would do is he would cut out the cheeks of these dogs, and inside that, and this is going to be very difficult, and I probably will not be able to draw this properly. So inside this, you have these little ducts. Oh, that's all right. Okay, these little ducts, and these ducts secrete saliva. And so what Pavlov did was he would take little tubes, he would give the dog some food powder, not even actual food, but food powder. Um, and then he would measure how much saliva the dog excreted. And he was doing this for something in his research. I'm not exactly sure what he needed it for, but he was doing it. So as he was going along, he started to run into a problem. The dogs seemed to be salivating less and less as he did the experiment more and more. But what really was happening is the dog wasn't salivating less; it was that the dog was salivating early. So what was happening is the dog had learned that every time Ivan Pavlov came into the room and set him up on this contraption, what was going to happen? He was going to get food. And so the dog would begin to salivate the moment that Pavlov, or would began to salivate the moment that Pavlov walked into the room, because the dog knew it was going to get some food. Okay? So what we're going to do from here is we are going to go step by step into this process. Like there's very specific like terms and steps and things that of that nature that I'm going to talk about, and so just kind of follow along. You will be responsible for knowing these steps, and you will be responsible for having to pick out those steps in a situation. So let's get after it. So we need to look at classical conditioning as a type of passive learning. Ooh, yeah. I could type this out, but this is much better. Passive. Perfect. All right. So it's a type of passive learning. So what I mean by this is that classical conditioning happens automatically. It is a thing that um, the learner doesn't really know is happening. It just kind of happens to them. So the way that this happens is we have to start with what we call an unconditioned or an unconditional relationship. Okay, so we have two items. We have two things that are what we would call naturally occurring. Okay, so think about the first thing that we have. We have food. Okay, so when you have food, a natural occurrence for someone who is eating food or about to eat food, think about like really good food that maybe your parents make or your favorite restaurant, and what's going to happen? Oftentimes, what's going to happen is we are going to begin to salivate. Okay, so this is what we would call a naturally occurring relationship. Your body is naturally geared to salivate towards food that you like or just good food in general. Um, and so this is how it starts with classical conditioning. We have a naturally occurring relationship. So the thing that causes a response is what is known as an unconditioned stimulus, which in the shorthand when you're writing it is going to be the UCS. And the unconditioned stimulus causes an unconditioned response. So when we're using the word unconditioned, we're saying unlearned. This is just natural. This is something that naturally occurs. So it's two things that naturally occur. So the unconditioned stimulus is the thing that causes an unconditioned response, and the response is talking about your reaction to that stimulus. So, what you have here in this situation is Pavlov's dogs are naturally reacting to the food that is being presented to them, and they are doing that by salivating. So that's the first step. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to add to that. So first things first, we still have our UCS here, our unconditioned stimulus, and we have our unconditioned response, our UCR. So now, in order for us to be looking at classical conditioning, we need to add the next step, and that is what we would call the NS, also known as the neutral stimulus. Neutral. Oh, I'm a natural at this. A neutral stimulus. Okay, so the neutral stimulus is anything that is outside of this naturally occurring relationship. Anything that is outside this naturally occurring relationship. Okay, um, and with this neutral stimulus, in our example, is going to be Ivan Pavlov. When Ivan Pavlov comes into the situation, he should not elicit any type of response. The dog is not going to do anything. He's not going to salivate. He's not going to do anything until he has learned something. And the learning has not occurred yet. So we have Ivan Pavlov, the neutral stimulus, coming in and interacting with the unconditional and the unconditioned stimulus and the unconditioned response. Okay, so what we have is we have the neutral stimulus over here, Ivan Pavlov, look at that beard. We have the neutral stimulus over here, and then we have the unconditioned stimulus on the other side. So what is going to happen is these two things are going to become paired. So what is going to happen is when there are multiple instances of the neutral stimulus showing up and the unconditioned showing up, is your brain or the dog's brain is going to pair, it's going to link those two things together. Okay? And this is a process known as acquisition. Okay? It is the linking of the neutral stimulus over here with the unconditioned stimulus. We are recognizing, okay, every time Ivan Pavlov comes into the room, well, I'm going to get something. I'm going to get some food. And so the dog is learning, it is creating this link between both the both Ivan Pavlov and the food. And it is beginning to learn, and that process of pairing the neutral stimulus with the unconditioned stimulus is known as acquisition. And it is just the recognition or the pairing of these two things. All right, so now what's going to happen is what was once our neutral stimulus, okay, is now going to be no more. We won't call it this anymore. Because what has happened because of the concept of acquisition is we've learned something. So now the neutral stimulus becomes your conditioned stimulus, okay? So it is the thing that we've learned is going to cause something to happen. And so, what is the dog going to do? It's going to salivate whenever it sees Ivan Pavlov walk into the door. Why is the dog salivating? It is because it knows that when Ivan Pavlov comes in, Ivan Pavlov is going to give him some food, and so the dog is going to begin to salivate. And that response is no longer unconditioned. It is a learned response. So we would call this a conditioned response, a CR. The dog has been conditioned to respond to this stimulus, which is no longer neutral because we have paired it with the unconditioned stimulus. So now this becomes the conditioned stimulus, and whenever we see the conditioned stimulus, we are going to get a learned response. Okay, so let me just show you a quick video on this concept. This comes from The Office, and this is looking at classical conditioning. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide and let's talk about what happened there. Okay, so let's take a look at that example. So you have Dwight and Jim from The Office. And what we need to do is we need to be able to break down each of those parts of that learning. How did Dwight learn in this situation? And be able to break it down into its subsequent parts. So you need to be able to tell me what the UCS is. You need to be able to tell me what the UCR is, the NS, the CS, and CR. So I'm just going to go through this one with you. If you think you can do this without me explaining it, just pause the video really quick and I'll get started in 2 seconds. 1, 2. Okay, so let's start at the beginning with the unconditioned stimulus and the unconditioned response. What is the naturally occurring relationship? Now, I get this a lot where students are like, "Oh, well, the naturally occurring relationship is the Bing. That's what he's responding to." But that's not what it is. That's not the naturally occurring relationship. The naturally occurring relationship is the outoid and um, reaching out for it. So the Bing from the computer is your neutral response. excuse me, not neutral response, the neutral stimulus. It is the thing that is outside. When someone asks you, would you like an Altoid? You're going to reach out and be like, yeah, sure. And that's what's happening here is Jim is asking Dwight, hey, do you want an Altoid? And Dwight is like, yeah, I'll take an Altoid, and reaches his hand out to accept the Altoid. The bing from the computer is the thing that's happening in the background. This is what Jim is trying to train Dwight with. And so, after doing it again and again and again, we are going to have a process known as acquisition. These two items, the UC, the NS, I did not mark that properly. Hold on. Nope, I need the eraser. Thank you. Okay. The UCS, the Altoid, and the NS, the Bing from the computer, are going to be paired together. This is what we call acquisition. I'm not going to try to write out acquisition. I'll just write out A. Okay, this is acquisition. These two things are being paired together, and so what is going to happen is that now that those two things have been paired together, the neutral stimulus is going to become your conditioned stimulus, and the bing from the computer is going to cause Dwight to do what? It is going to cause him to reach out. Is he reaching out because of the Altoid or Jim offering the Altoid? No. He is reaching out because he hears the bing from the computer, just like in the video. Okay, I'm going to give you two more examples of this. So go ahead, take a second, pause this, and work this out for yourself. Try to figure out what the UCS, UCR, do the same setup as you did last time. You'll be responsible for writing it this way. Start with the UCS and then go UCR and all that. Okay, so I'll give you a couple seconds and then I will go ahead and pause the video and I will work on this with you. 1, 2, 3. Okay, you get shots every 3 months in the doctor's office for back pain. Your back feels better when you see the nurse who gives you the shots at the grocery store. So start from the beginning. Our naturally occurring relationship is what? What is our UCS and UCR? The UCS is the drugs or the shots that you get every 3 months. And what does that do? It makes your back feel better. That's just how it works. You get drugs for a thing and it's supposed to help. So you're getting drugs for this thing, and that is what's going to make your back feel better. So your UCS is the shots, the UCR is your back feeling better. So what's the neutral stimulus in this situation? The neutral stimulus is the nurse. The nurse doesn't really have anything to do with this other than the fact that that person is the person that is giving you that medicine. Okay, so after doing this every 3 months, this happens multiple times. What is going to happen? Well, you are going to get used to, and you are going to pair the unconditioned stimulus, the shots, with your neutral stimulus, the nurse. And so this is a process known as acquisition. Okay, so when you see that person in the grocery store, your conditioned stimulus is going to be the nurse, and the nurse is going to give you a conditioned response, and that conditioned response is that you are going to feel better. Let's get it split up in 2 spots. Okay, there you go. All right, let's do another one. Okay, this one's a little tougher, so go ahead. I'll give you 3 seconds to pause this video, and then we'll explain it. 1, 2, 3. Susie goes outside to play in her treehouse. A swarm of bees has nested near her house, and she gets stung several times when she climbs up to the treehouse, causing her much pain. This happens 3 times in a week. Susie then becomes afraid to go near the tree and cries violently when her dad tries to get her to climb up to the treehouse. So here we go. First things first, what is our unconditioned stimulus? The unconditioned stimulus are the bee stings. Okay? She gets stung by the bees. And this is going to what? What does this do? What is our response to these bee stings? Much pain. She is in a lot of pain. So this is our UCR. I need to stop doing this. That's our UCR, and being stung is our UCS. Okay. So now, what is the neutral stimulus here? The neutral stimulus is the location of that place, the treehouse. So I don't know why this takes Susie more than once to realize that the thing is dangerous. She does it 3 times in a week, and she finds that, all right, well, this treehouse, every time I go, I'm getting stung. And so we have that pairing of the neutral stimulus, the treehouse here, and the unconditioned stimulus of being stung. And those two things are paired together, process known as acquisition, of course. And this happens 3 times in a week. And so she then learns that the CS is your treehouse. Okay, she has learned that the treehouse is going to be a place where she gets stung. So, does she feel pain when her father tries to get her to go to the thing? No, she does not. Susie then becomes afraid and cries violently. So what is her CR? Is her CR the fact that she is in pain? No, her CR is that she cries and that she is afraid. Okay, so while the UCS, while the NS and the CS are always going to be the same, that is not always true for the UCR and the CR. The UCR and the CR are oftentimes different, and that is dependent most often on how long it is from the original instance. And let me show you another one to give you an example. Okay, so go ahead, tackle this one about Geraldine. 3 seconds. One, two, three. Okay, so Geraldine had an automobile accident at the corner of 32nd and Cherry Avenue. The event left her feeling terrified. Whenever she approaches the intersection now, she begins to feel uncomfortable. Her heart begins to beat faster, she gets butterflies in her stomach, and her palms become sweaty. Okay, so UCR, UCS. Easy. Okay? Automobile accident is obviously the cause of this thing. This is your UCS. Okay? Now, our UCR is feeling terrified. Okay? This is our UCR. The event left her UCR. The event left her terrified. That is horrible. The event left her terrified. Okay? Now, our neutral stimulus is a little weird. Our neutral stimulus is going to be this corner of 32nd and Cherry Avenue. This is going to be our NS. Okay? It is the thing that has nothing to do with what's going on, but it's still involved. And you'll see what ends up happening is that the NS obviously becomes the CS the next time that she approaches. Whenever she approaches the intersection now, she begins to what? Is she feeling terrified? No. She just feels really uncomfortable. Her heart begins to beat faster. She gets butterflies. She's feeling anxiety or fear. This is your conditioned response. This is how Geraldine responds to going to that 32nd and Cherry Avenue. For any of you who have gotten into a car wreck before, oftentimes it takes you a little bit, maybe a couple days, maybe longer, to no longer feel uncomfortable, especially if the automobile accident was bad. So in this instance, what you have is you have an acquisition that happens almost immediately. And so the more traumatic or the more like intense a situation is, the faster acquisition is going to occur. You don't need to be in 5 automobile accidents to realize or to be trepidatious or worried or concerned about a certain intersection. It usually only takes once. So the more intense a thing is, the quicker we are going to learn it.